Between 1968 and 1969, 3 young women were strangled and left dead after nights out at the Barrowland Ballroom in Glasgow's East End. All 3 victims had danced with a man who gave his name as John and quoted the Bible. Despite Scotland's biggest manhunt, he was never caught. This is the story of Bible John, the killer who vanished into the crowd. Thursday night, October 30th, 1969. Helen Putic, a 29-year-old mother of 2, kissed her husband goodbye and headed out with her sister Jeannie to the Barrowland Ballroom on Gallowgate. It was a regular thing for Glasgow women back then. Thursday was ladies' night at the Barrowland, a chance to escape the schemes and dance to live bands. Helen's husband was staying home with the kids. She'd be back by midnight. The Barrowland was packed that night, over 1,000 people crammed into the dance hall. Helen and Jeannie met 2 men on the floor. Both were called John, reportedly. One left early. The other, tall, well-dressed, about 25 to 30 years old with reddish-brown hair, stayed close to Helen all night. Witnesses would later describe him as good-looking, well-spoken, different from the usual crowd. He wore a tailored suit. His shoes were polished. He quoted scripture between dances. Just after midnight, Helen, Jeannie, and this John left together. They shared a taxi heading south. Jeannie got dropped off first in Knightswood. Helen continued on with John toward her home in Scottstown. The taxi driver would later tell police that John seemed agitated during the ride, ranting about adultery and women who neglected their children to go dancing. When Jeannie suggested they all get fish and chips, John snapped that he didn't eat on Thursdays. Religious reasons, he said. Helen Putic's body was found the next morning in her parents' back garden on Earl Street in Scottstown. She'd been strangled with her own tights. Her handbag was missing. Bite marks covered her body. She was the 3rd woman murdered after leaving the Barrowland Ballroom in 18 months. And Strathclyde police finally had a witness who'd spent the entire evening with the killer. The first victim was Patricia Docker, 25 years old, a nurse's auxiliary from Langside. On the night of February 22, 1968, she'd gone to the Barrowland alone. Her parents were babysitting her 4-year-old son. Patricia was seen dancing with a tall, well-dressed man with short brown hair. She left with him around 11:30 p.m. Her body was discovered the following morning in a lane off Carmichael Place, less than a mile from the dance hall. She'd been strangled, beaten, and raped. Her handbag was gone. The murder shocked Glasgow, but in 1968, single mothers going to dance halls were judged harshly. The investigation was thorough, but there were no strong leads. The case went cold within months. Most people assumed it was a one-off, a violent punter who'd got carried away. Then, in August 1969, Jemima MacDonald, known as Mima, became the second victim. She was 32, a mother of 3 from Bridgeton. On Saturday, August 16th, she went to the Barrowland with her sister Margaret. Like Patricia Docker, Mima was seen dancing with a tall, well-dressed man. Witnesses described him as smartly turned out, polite, around 25 years old with reddish-brown hair. He told people his name was John. Mima left the Barrowland with this man around midnight. Her body was found the next morning in a derelict tenement building on Mackkeith Street in Bridgeton, less than half a mile from her home. She'd been strangled and beaten. Once again, her handbag was missing. And once again, the killer had simply disappeared into the night. 2 women, both mothers, both strangled after dancing with a man called John at the Barrowland. The police now had a pattern. Strathclyde launched a major investigation, interviewing hundreds of men who'd been at the dance hall on those nights. But Glasgow in the late 1960s was a city of dance halls and packed ballrooms. Thousands of men fit the vague description. Short brown hair, well-dressed, polite, it described half the blokes in Glasgow trying to impress women on a Saturday night. Then came Helen Putic's murder. And this time, there was a witness. Jeannie Williams, Helen's sister, had spent hours with the killer. She gave police the most detailed description they'd ever had. The man was between 25 and 30, about 5'10", slim build, reddish-brown hair cut short and neat. He had straight white teeth, possibly overlapping slightly at the front. He wore a brown or black suit, well-tailored, and immaculate brown shoes. His accent was educated Glasgow, not rough scheme talk. And throughout the night, he'd quoted the Bible. Jeannie told police that John had talked about scripture constantly. He'd mentioned a passage about Moses and adultery. He'd ranted about women who went dancing instead of staying home with their children. When Helen mentioned she was married, his mood had darkened. In the taxi, he'd been agitated, angry even. And Jeannie remembered something else. He'd mentioned being raised strictly, religious upbringing. His father, he said, had been unforgiving. The press seized on the religious angle. The killer became Bible John, and the name stuck. Every newspaper in Scotland ran sketches based on Jeannie's description. The image showed a clean-cut young man with neat hair, strong jaw, respectable looking. He could have been anyone. He could have been the guy serving you in the bank or sitting next to you on the bus. Strathclyde police launched the biggest manhunt in Scottish history. Over 50,000 men were interviewed. Police staked out the Barrowland every Thursday and Saturday night for months. Dance halls across Glasgow were monitored. Officers went door to door in every scheme in the city. They checked mental hospitals, army records, church congregations. They looked at everyone. One suspect emerged early. John Irvine McInnes, known as Jock, worked as a Scotsdown furniture salesman. He was 41, married with 2 children, and a regular at the Barrowland. He fit the physical description closely enough. Witnesses claimed they'd seen him at the dance hall on the nights in question. McInnes was brought in for questioning multiple times. His alibi for Helen Puddick's murder was weak. He claimed he'd been home, but his wife couldn't confirm it. She'd been in bed asleep. But there was a problem. Jeannie Williams never identified McInnes in a lineup. She said the man looked similar, but she wasn't certain. And in 1969, that wasn't enough. Without forensic evidence linking him to the crimes, without a positive ID from the only witness, police couldn't charge him. McInnes died in 1980, reportedly taking his own life. To this day, some investigators believe he was Bible John. Others aren't convinced. The investigation ran into another issue. Forensics in the 1960s were limited. There was no DNA testing, no advanced forensic techniques. The bite marks on Helen Puddick's body were analyzed, but dental records alone weren't enough to secure a conviction. Semen samples were taken from Patricia Docker's body, but without DNA profiling, they were almost useless. All police had were witness statements, and memories fade under pressure. By 1970, the trail had gone cold. No more murders matching the pattern occurred. Bible John, whoever he was, had either stopped killing, left Glasgow, or died. Theories multiplied. Some believed he'd been a traveling salesman who'd moved on. Others thought he might have been military, posted overseas after 1969. There were claims he'd emigrated to America or Australia. A few investigators suggested he might have killed himself, consumed by guilt or fear of capture. In 1983, Strathclyde police reopened the case using new forensic methods. They exhumed John McInnes's body from Stonehouse Cemetery and attempted to extract DNA from his teeth to compare with the 1969 semen samples. But the samples had degraded. The results were inconclusive. The case remained unsolved. Theories about Bible John's identity have never stopped. Some researchers claimed he might have been Peter Tobin, the serial killer convicted in 2007 of murdering 3 young women. Tobin was in Glasgow during the late 1960s, and he fit the age range. But the physical descriptions didn't match perfectly, and again, there was no definitive proof. Police investigated the connection thoroughly but found nothing concrete. Others pointed to a man named Peter Manuel, a Glasgow serial killer executed in 1958, but he was dead a decade before the Barrowland murders began. Another theory suggested Bible John might have been a police officer himself, which would explain why he was never caught. Conspiracy theories grew, as they always do when cases go unsolved. The Barrowland Ballroom is still standing on Gallowgate. It's been renovated, renamed, but locals still call it the Barrowland. And for older Glaswegians, the name still carries weight. Bible John changed the city. Women stopped going to dance halls alone. Thursday night crowds at the Barrowland dropped off. A generation of Glasgow mothers warned their daughters, never leave with a man you don't know. Helen Putick's son grew up without his mother. Patricia Docker's boy did the same. Jemima MacDonald's 3 children lost her when they were young. The families have never had closure. No arrest, no trial, no conviction. Just decades of questions and a killer who walked free. In 2013, Strathclyde police officially closed the active investigation. Too much time had passed. Witnesses had died. Evidence had been lost or degraded beyond use. The case remains open technically, but realistically, Bible John will never be caught. He's either dead or too old to prosecute. What haunts investigators most is how ordinary he seemed. Clean-cut, polite, well-dressed, he wasn't a monster lurking in the shadows. He was a man who blended in perfectly, who charmed women on the dance floor, who quoted scripture before he killed. And that's what made him so dangerous. He looked like everyone else. Bible John is one of Scotland's most infamous unsolved cases, up there with the Moors murders in terms of cultural impact. His story has been covered in books, documentaries, podcasts, TV dramas. But for all the theories and speculation, the truth is simple: we don't know who he was. We don't know if he killed more women elsewhere. We don't know if he's still alive. And we likely never will. If you've got theories about Bible John or you want me to cover another Scottish cold case, leave a comment. And if you're into Glasgow crime history, hit that subscribe button. There's plenty more where this came from.